Hey YouTube, got another review for you here today. Don't mind me, I'm just eating a little breakfast pizza. Okay, today I'm going to be reviewing the book by Wolfe, Electric Koolaid Acid Test. One of my favorite books of all time. I was fortunate enough to be able to actually borrow an original hardcover copy that I do not have with me anymore, unfortunately, but when I read it, which I've only read it once, I was able to borrow an original hardcover copy from a friend and read that, and it was published, I believe, in like 1966 or 1967, one of those, and it's a great book. Oh my god. Let me just start off by saying this is a very, very good book. It's about the famous, group of hippies, some of the pioneering LSD, psychedelic using hippies, headed by the non-navigator, Ken Kesey, and, not really, but he was kind of essentially the leader, if you really want to look at it in that way, but basically, Ken Kesey, Merry Pranksters, they have this whole thing, they get together, it talks about the background of how, in 1960, 1961, Kesey was living on this street, like in California, I believe California, it might have been somewhere else, but I think it was Cali, it's in someplace in Cali, and, he, gets all the people on this street in this interesting neighborhood, and actually, they start out with using peyote, actually, as one of the main things they first start getting, because apparently they have a way to get easy access to it. What they do is it says, and I found this very interesting, I never knew that you could do this, but apparently at that time, you would be able to, actually order peyote in the mail, dried buttons of peyote, hundreds of them, for super cheap, because at that time it was legal, and you'd be able to order that in the mail, kind of similar to today, how you can order, San Pedro or whatever. And they were experimenting with peyote, as well as, maybe some more psychedelics that they would somehow acquire in those very early days. I don't think it specifically mentions anything more than peyote, because I think that was really the main thing that they were using, but, whatever. So, time goes on, and I forget exactly how it happened, but basically, at some point, Kesey and a bunch of people, just a bunch of people that he knows, his buddies and stuff, and his wife, and the whole deal, they all get together, and they form this group, centered in this, warehouse, actually. And they all just hang out in there, and they, trip in there and get high and all that stuff, and they just, interesting people come by, and they just have interesting situations, and Neil Cassidy's there, and actually, if you look up Neil Cassidy and you see the photos of him in the warehouse with the sledgehammer, those photos were taken in this exact place that I'm describing. I don't think it had any special name. If it did, I can't remember this place, but, this warehouse in Cali where they were based out of, essentially, and, they would all, hang out there and live there, essentially, they had, little, mattresses thrown on the floor, when you wanted to sleep, but most of them, they were constantly taking, the Merry Pranksters, the things that they were big on, they had three things they were big on: amphetamines, LSD-25, and grass. Those are the three things that they loved to take. And then, there, like I mentioned before, there were a few other things, like in the early days, peyote, or, a few other random drugs here and there. But grass, LSD, and speed were the three main things that they were really big into. And, yeah, so they start out in the warehouse, and Tom Wolfe is kind of like, going along with them, and he's like a character in it, but it's weird because it doesn't really, it doesn't mention very much about their interaction directly to him. It's like almost as if he's kind of just like not really a part of them and just kind of like wrote all about what they did. It's a weird perspective, but he writes all about their different adventures, and they get this boss called Further, the famous boss, the Grateful Dead, have become Further, the band now. I don't know if you guys know about that, but, basically they got that name from the boss, because they wrote Further with the U instead of the E at the end, on the bus, and they were taking this bus, and, they went, all the way from Cali to Manhattan, and, on the first leg of that trip, Cassidy drove him out there, when they were taking acid, and getting high, and all that shit. Just going crazy, and they have all these different little things, and they pick up people, they lose people, different shit happens. I won't go into the details, how I go, but then they go back again, and Cassie doesn't go with them on the way back. At a certain point in the book, some of the characters, I won't say who, because I don't want to give it away too much, get arrested. That becomes part of the theme. And then they're wanted, and they got warrants, and they're running away from the cops, and they come up with all these different, concepts, they come up with their own concepts for, how they look at reality, and the book is really written through, a very tripped out, headspace, I'll call it. When you read that book, if you haven't taken psychedelics, or at least smoked, a shit ton of grass in your life, you're probably not going to be able to understand it that well, in all seriousness. It really speaks from specifically, if I really had to nail it down, I would say it speaks from specifically, a very LSD, acid trip kind of point of view. All the concepts they come up with and all the different little things that they do, it all came from acid. They give a lot of the credit to the acid, but, acid's not everything, it didn't completely influence them 100%, but it was definitely in there, definitely big in there, and later on in the book, they go down to Mexico and all this crazy shit happens, similar to, On the Road and stuff like that, and, it's kind of, in its own way, honestly, one of the ways that I looked at it was, it's kind of like a hippie's version of On the Road, because, think about it. You got Cassidy is the driver, just like in On the Road. He's literally the engine that is putting this whole gaggle of crazy people who are at that point, it was just getting the concept of the hippies cranking up, you know what I mean? At that point, some people were still even considering this, a later leg of the beat movement. you know, considering the fact that you've got Cassidy and Kesey in there, I mean, they're definitely beat figures. You know, I mean, the fact that they're in there definitely shows directly that the hippies evolved straight out of the beach. And if you really want to just look at it in a certain way, you can consider it all one big thing. That's how I look at it personally. But, you know, it's one of those books that doesn't really have too much of, like, a linear, like, plot. You know, like most autobiographical books, like, don't really have that kind of, like, linear build up necessarily the way that a novel would, you know. And the whole book, 100% true. None of it is, like, pish-posh. All of it is to a T, absolutely true. And, one thing I will say, that, always, you know, I don't like to, say anything about the ending of books in my reviews, and don't worry, I'm not going to give away the ending to the book, but I will say that unfortunately, at the end, it does say that shortly after the last events of the book, that, you know, Cassidy passed away in I believe it was, 68, or maybe 1967, one of those years, but, I remember just, like, I read that whole book, you know, enjoyed it so much, and, you know, it was going from, like, 1960 to, like, 1967, and I just remember thinking, like, towards the end, like, wow, you know, like, I already knew, like, Cassidy died, like, you know, right then, and it, like, that was, like, literally the last page. It was, like, talking about how Cassidy died, and it just kind of was, like, a sad final thought to think that, like, that's the road that it led him down. Unfortunately, you know, not that he died of a drug overdose or anything. No one really knows how he died, actually, but I don't know, it's just kind of got me in the heart, so I thought I'd mention that. But, yeah, I would rate that book a solid 9. Excellent book. I would highly recommend it. Anybody who's interested in Kesey, Cassidy, the beats, the hippies, tripping, any of that stuff, I would recommend it. It's a really good book. And that's really all I have to say as far as that one goes. You know, you just gotta, that one, just go out there and read it. I'm telling you, if you're watching this review, you probably either have already read it or you really should. Like, that's a fantastic book. I would recommend that to a very wide audience. Some of the books that I personally happen to really enjoy as my favorite books, like, let's say Junkie or Naked Lunch or whatever, you know, like, I wouldn't really recommend those kinds of things to, like, a wider array of people, but, you know, I would definitely say that Electric Koolaid Acid Test, I would recommend that to a lot of people, so definitely check it out. Well, that's about it for this review, so see y'all later.